There's all kinds of ways to write historical fiction. You can tell your story and put costumes on people. This gets you to Braveheart. Interesting movie, not much in there really happened. Or you can study the history and write the history and maybe invent some dialogue, and that's not very interesting. But the reason I switched from history to historical fiction is the wall of ignorance out there is so massive and so opaque. If I told you about a demographic of people, 80% of them don't know what's in the Emancipation Proclamation. 80% of them don't know what's in the Bill of Rights. You think we're talking about the most ignorant of the ignorant? That's recent college graduates. Okay? Half the people out there in the country can't read above 9th grade level. So, they don't want to read history, they don't want to be educated, but they want to hear stories, they want to be entertained. So, especially after discovering you get about 6 times more money for historical fiction than you do for real history, I thought, well, let's give this a try. So, the Bliven Putnam Naval Adventure series that I'm doing for Putnam Sons. Now, why did I name my character Putnam when it's going to be published by Putnam? That was a way to kind of bludgeon the publisher into buying it. I thought they'd never go for it, but they did. So now that's the name we got. If you're familiar with the genre of tall ship naval fiction, the Horatio Hornblower books from the 30s and 40s and 50s, the Master and Commander books by Patrick O'Brien from the 60s and 70s. Well, those are all British, they're all Napoleonic. Americans, you can tell them anything, they'll believe it. There was a very smart editor at Putnam who was telling my agent, well, you know, we'd really like to do a series like that, but with American ships and American sailors, but we're not really sure that the American Navy's doing anything between, say, the War of 1812 and the Civil War. So I got home from work that day and there was a phone message from my editor saying, call me, opportunity knocks. Well, opportunity doesn't knock very often, so I grabbed him by the belt, pulled him indoors. And 2 days later, I sent them a proposal for 6 interlocking novels with recurring characters. Now, mind you, the Hornblower series, the Master and Commander series, were never intended to be series. They did one, well, just sold enough, maybe we'll try another one. So they're a mess of prequels and sequels, and they're in no order in particular. We had a chance to begin in 2016 with The Shores of Tripoli, which is our 2 main characters. It's a buddy series. Our 2 main characters are 14-year-old midshipmen. They bond during the Barbary Pirate War in 1800, from 1800 to 1805. One is from Connecticut, the other is from South Carolina. So you see they've got some culture that they have to bridge. In the second book, in the War of 1812, they're lieutenants. In the third book, which I'm going to read from, they are, it's set among the missionaries who went to Hawaii in 1819. So, in the reading, which I will get to now, third book is going to be called The Devil in Paradise, set mostly in the Hawaiian Islands, although our main character is in the Philippines and China fighting pirates. This is really his wife's book. It's set in Litchfield, Connecticut, where they're from, because this was the actual locus of the whole missionary effort to send people to Hawaii to convert the natives. Showing up in Connecticut in 1809, there were refugees from the Kamehameha Wars in the Hawaiian Islands. All this slaughter and brutality, people got away. Well, one of them, who became known to the Americans as Obukia, because they couldn't handle his real Hawaiian name, which is Opukaha'ia, he went to Yale, he went to seminary, he became a preacher. And he started putting needles in people, saying, if you really believed all this Jesus stuff that you preach, you would send missionaries to my country and end all this war and horror. We didn't just send missionaries to Hawaii because we're Americans and that's what we do. So, when we talk about Obukia here, this is a real person, all right? So, when he got sick and died, which he really did, Clarity, who's a fictitious character, hears about it and she goes up to see him. And this is at the seminary in Cornwall. They mounted the flight of steps, steep and narrow, and found the door open. "Oh, Miss Clearday, you have come. Oh!" Clarity approached the bed, appalled at how much weight he had lost, his eyes white and deep and the sunken black skin around them. The speaking and sounds of footsteps on the plank floor awakened a middle-aged woman who had been dozing in a Windsor chair by the window. As soon as she moved, she grabbed at her neck, which had taken a crick as she slept. "Oh, Mrs. Mills," said Clarity, "please do go down and stretch and rest. We will watch over Henry for a while." They held hands for a second before she left, and they heard her descending the stairs. "How are you feeling, Henry?" Obukia caught sight of Beecher hanging by the back door. "Oh, Mrs. Putnam, I fear that I will not live to see my home again, my beloved Hawaii." "We cannot know that. If you rest and eat, you may grow strong again." She saw the sheet beneath his back soaked from sweat, as was the pillowcase. "Reverend, come help me." She removed a thick towel from a quilt spreader at the foot of the bed and shook it out to its full size. "Don't stand there, come help me." She looked in the drawer of a nearby lowboy and found a dry shirt. "Can you sit up?" She and Beecher pulled the wet shirt from his back. "Oh, Mrs. Putnam, it is not fitting that you should see me thus." "Hush, Henry, this is no time to be squeamish." She spread the dry towel behind him and turned the pillow to the dry side up, and they pulled the dry shirt down his back. Gently, they laid him back down, and Clarity washed his face with the cloth from a basin of water. "That is so very comfortable. I am sorry to be such trouble." Clarity did not sit on the bed or remove her gloves, but she held his hand, and they looked deep, eyes into eyes. "Dear Henry," she said. His tears welled up, but he held them in check. "I wish for someone to see my family, my grandmother, if she lives, to say that I remember her and I love her, and my uncle, the priest to the storm god. Tell them that I thank him for raising me, that I love him, and that I hope he can find peace and true religion as I have. Who can tell them these things?" Who indeed, thought Clarity. They heard a commotion downstairs and realized that their arrival had been noticed, and now the younger Dwight and the other Hawaiians, Hopu, Tamari, and Honori, were coming up the stairs. "See?" Henry pointed weakly to the desk nearby. "I have not been idle." She looked at the desk with papers and an inkwell and quills. Henry released her. "Go and see, please." Atop a short stack of paper, she saw a title page written in a large, simple hand that read, "Kabaibala Himalele." She lifted the covering sheet gently and saw the text on the second page in single lines, numbered by verse with a blank line between the verses, the script clear but rote and childlike. 1. Ikinohi hana ke akua I kalane ameka honua. She recognized some of the words that he had playfully taught her over the years. Beginning, God created heaven, earth. She looked stricken back at the bed and saw Obukia studying her. "It is correct," he said weakly. "I am certain I have not made mistake." "Oh, Henry, it's not easy. My language has never had writing. I must be guided by the sounds, and I have only begun. I do not know why the Lord should take me before I finish, but he knows best." He sank into his pillow, exhausted by speech. Surely he knows best. And we move to a letter. Litchfield, Connecticut, 20th February, 1818. "My dearest husband, oh, my captain, where are you? What ocean are you sailing upon when I have such need of your society, your comfort, of your great strong arms? Yes, there has been a tragedy, but not touching you directly, for your parents and my mother all enjoy tolerable health in this frost unseasonable even for New England in midwinter. Our foreign friend, Mr. Obukia of the Sandwich Islands, took sick and went to his heavenly reward a few days since, and I have just returned home from the service held for him. He was resident in New Haven, or Andover, or Cornwall for 9 years, since he was but a youth. He became highly educated, and when he sent for me, I saw in his room the pages he had written to translate the Bible into his language. Over the years, we had passed many pleasant hours together, I telling him about America, and he telling me about his country, his language, the flowers and birds, but also the volcanoes that throw fire 1,000 feet into the air, and telling me with grief of their heathen priests and hideous idols. He said there were many things about their society that were not fit to relate to a lady, which I doubt not, but as you know me, made me only the more curious about them. I knew nothing of his illness until our dear Harriet came to fetch me about 10 days after the great snowfall, and Reverend Beecher came for me in their sleigh, and drove us to Cornwall, where Henry lay in his room. I tended him for a couple of hours to relieve Mrs. Mills, who was quite exhausted, and he was by turns delirious and in perfect possession of his senses. He spoke affectionate farewells to all present, including to his countrymen in their own language. We departed when he said he felt he should sleep a little, and at the last he said to me, "Aloha oe," which he told me many times was their universal hello and goodbye, but deeper in feeling it means my love be with you. Downstairs we took tea, and after a time Hopu went up to check him. He returned in shock and tears and said, "He has gone." At the last, when we rushed back to the room where he lay, you will think I'm carried away in this by my emotion, but I declare to you I am not. He lay dead, but he was smiling. He was smiling as surely as you shall smile when next we meet. Doubtless it was because of the prank he played on Death, who came for his body but could not take his soul. Reverend Beecher was much affected by this turn of events. Downstairs, he and Mr. Mills and Mr. Dwight the Younger all confessed to one another that each had tried to talk him down from his mighty zeal to return to Hawaii and preach to his people. They had many times adjured him to realize the danger of such a mission, that he might very truly be taken and killed by the priests of the wooden idols, but he met them at every turn. He held up their own Bible to them. He said he was ready. Does not the Bible say, "He who loses his life for my sake shall find it"? And do you know, dearest, when these high churchmen realized that each had opposed him and been bested, the great dark pall cast over them was more than grief. It was shame. And when the room was at its most silence, it was because they were ashamed of themselves.